Well, okay, so we are live again. I really don't know what happened there. So let's just carry on. Wow, great. Okay, so sorry about that. I don't know what exactly happened. I stopped being live, and because I was giving a very long-winded explanation about Kotlin, um, I really have no idea what part of that was caught on camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask the people in the chat, does anyone know where I left off? Not sure what the fuck happened. Pardon my language, but we'll get back on track in a minute here. This is the problem with doing the live stuff is, yeah. Anyways, what I might do is, that's a little bit unfortunate that that happened because I don't think that video will get spliced together, but that's totally okay. So what I'm going to do is I might have been offline for up to 11 minutes, so I'm just going to recap really quickly my answer about Java and Kotlin, and then we'll just carry on. And that's life. So anyways, just really quickly, I literally just spent 11 minutes explaining this, so I'll probably be a little more brief in my explanation this time. But just in case I missed this entirely, or the stream missed this entirely, the question was, should someone who's made it as far as developing a few apps in Android stick with Java or switch to writing code in Kotlin instead? So just really, really briefly, what is Kotlin? It's a Java-based programming language. It runs on the JVM, and it's fully interoperable with Java, which means that you can have a project which is all Java, 50-50, all Kotlin, and anything in between. Now, a couple important things that were announced recently at Google I/O was that Kotlin is now officially supported by the Android platform. So that's really important. Excuse me. And then as of Android Studio 3.0, if you upgrade to 3.0, Kotlin ships out of the box in Android Studio. So yeah, a couple things just really about it. It's less verbose than Java. It's got a lot of interesting things about it. However, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them because I've actually written more Swift code than I have in Java, or sorry, in Kotlin. So I'm not an expert in it, but I wanted to give a heads up on this. And so the question was, more specifically, just that was an introduction to Kotlin. So the question was, should someone who's like made an app or two switch to writing Kotlin instead, or should they stick with Java, or what should you kind of do if you're in a position where you're kind of somewhere along the spectrum of beginner to intermediate kind of level, or even further along? Should you consider writing in Kotlin or switching to Kotlin? So there's no easy answer. There's no clear answer is the first thing. However, there's a couple thoughts I can share with you. So first and foremost, it is too early to tell if Kotlin will unseat Java as the de facto Java, essentially. It's too early to tell that, so I don't really care to speculate on that. However, there are some very good reasons to learn Kotlin, in my opinion. This is the opinion piece. A person is asking my opinion, I'm giving it. Yeah. So, first and foremost, here is kind of my answer. If you are a beginner, so maybe you haven't even quite written a whole app, you're a beginner, I would not suggest you start with Kotlin. I would suggest you start with Java. And here's why. If/when Kotlin becomes the de facto standard for Android development, which it is officially supported now, but I don't think it's going to unseat Java in the next 2 to 5 years. But if you're a beginner, the problem is, and this is the key point, most learning resources online are written in Java right now. You need to be, if you're a beginner, you need to be able to read, you are going to want to be able to read tutorials that are written in Java. There are not a lot of tutorials, and I'm not speaking of Kotlin tutorials. I'm speaking of like you want to learn how to make the complicated stuff. Most of the code is written in Java because Kotlin is a new language. So my suggestion, if you're a beginner, I would strongly suggest you learn the basics of Java first, at least until the extent that you can read Java code and follow along tutorials. That's my suggestion. If you are further along, maybe you're closer to intermediate or something like that, you've written a couple apps, which is the Omar who asked the question is sort of in that position. My suggestion is, if you're comfortable with Java, you've got the basics, dive into Kotlin. Absolutely. It's going to be, employers would like to see that. It is, the thing is, they're going to relate to each other. There's going to be carryover if you learn Java and you learn Kotlin, so you don't have to worry about wasted time, essentially. So really what I'm just trying to say is, if you are in a position where you've got the basics of Java out of the way, go with what interests you. If you're interested in learning Kotlin, don't let anyone tell you not to. Really, don't let anyone tell you that because they don't know better. Don't let me tell you what to do. Just follow your interests. If Kotlin, and here's the thing about Kotlin, it's fully interoperable with Java. I think I'm repeating myself. The problem is I just explained this whole thing 10 minutes ago, so I literally don't know what I'm repeating. But it's fully interoperable, so you can include it, you can work it into a Java project. So start small if you like, blah, 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 follow your interests, that's that. Hopefully I'm still streaming this time. Looks like I am, yay! Okay, so that was that, Java versus Kotlin, and let's hop over to the chat. All right. So what do we got here? Just an interesting note. And I really apologize. I will try and pronounce your name, but I'll probably butcher it. I'm trying to think of where that name is from. If you could actually mention this, Panagiotis says, just on the topic of beginners in Kotlin, that he totally agrees, and as a beginner it's really hard to start Kotlin because the documentation on every aspect of Android development is in Java. So this is from someone who is like trying to learn this right now. So just my suggestion, just one more time to reiterate, I would strongly suggest if you're a beginner, learn the basics of Java first. In maybe 2 to 5 years' time, maybe there will be a lot more Kotlin resources. Right now, there isn't. So that's kind of just a fact. Great. So, oh, he's Greek. Okay, awesome. Panagiotis, or something vaguely of that nature. Okay, so what else have we got here? Vegeta says, let's make Java great again. That's possibly a Donald Trump. Donald Trump! Oh, my voice just cracked! A Donald Trump reference. Real garbage human being that guy is. Anyways, moving on. But politicians are politicians. So Samira asks, am I planning to do Android basics in Kotlin? I will do that eventually, but I have no idea when. Probably at least 2 months from now. Basically, I have the next 2 months planned entirely well ahead of time for all the stuff that I'll need to be learning, and Kotlin is quite peripheral to that. Now, I will be learning it soon. It's just not, not within, I can't make an official announcement about it. What else have we got? So once again, as usual, I'd like to remind everyone that this is a Q&A. So if you have any questions about really anything Android related, or if you've got a software architecture thing you'd like to know about, like a design patterns, model view presenter, blah, 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 anything like that, If you've got a general question, a vague question, I've got a nice one which I'll be answering later on adapters. Now would be the time to ask, giver. And yeah. So what I think I'll do is just while I wait for a couple questions, I just wanted to really briefly take everyone through what I've been working on last week. The unfortunate thing about this is because of my day job, I only get about an hour or two to actually work on this project. And then usually about an hour of that is spent doing social media stuff and answering questions for people. I don't have as much time to code as I would like in the past 2 weeks, just because everything's been really busy. I've got a new job, I'm doing this Q&A, blah, 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 wine, whatever. So, but the thing is, I've been trying to get Dagger 2 to hopefully be refactored for the last time, and I know I wasn't going to spend a huge amount of time answering questions about Dagger 2, but I would like to talk about it for a minute, so that's what I'm going to do. So here's basically the latest issue with Pause Trainer. The latest challenge. Let's see if I can kind of center that. So basically what's been going on is I've got the application tested. The alarms are working for the most part. So there was a couple major challenges. Let's go to alarm service. So one of the biggest challenges is that I tried to pull a whole bunch of like Android services. And what I mean by Android services, I mean almost all of these things, everything except context, comes from, let's go to Dagger 2 really quickly. That would be reminder module, I believe. Nope, that would be application, application module. So I know I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just as a note, that one of the big challenges with Pause Trainer, the application, is it uses a whole bunch of system services. And the reason why I say system services is because any of these things that say context.getSystemService, so that includes the audio manager, the vibrator, the alarm manager, all of which are contained within alarm service, all of these things, normally, kind of traditionally, all of those would be located and kind of used in an activity or something like that. They're kind of, I'll kind of even commit to saying they're designed for that, just because they come from context. Now, since I have Dagger 2, what I can do is actually kind of give those things to a service class that doesn't have anything to do with activity. Nothing. The only thing it should have to do with activity is the service should be held on to as long as the activity that uses it is in the foreground, but that's technical stuff I won't get into. So what is the latest challenge? I've managed to, let's see here. So I've managed to basically get everything working, except as you can see here, I want to be injecting these variables, these services, whatever, these APIs. I'll just say services. I want to be injecting these services with Dagger 2. Now the difficulty in that is there's a bunch of difficulties. This alarm service gets injected into the presenter. Yes, that's correct. So basically what I think I'm going to have to do, and this is kind of interesting, what this relates to. What this relates to is the way that I have the application set up currently. Again, to pull out my diagrams, there isn't really a distinction between these two layers. There's no line here. So what I'm going to try and do, and I'll probably work on this later today, is I'm going to work on pulling the services into little entity things, and then this layer, which will kind of become this class, will kind of become a use case, and then these things will kind of get pulled out of it into new classes. And the reason why that's important is because then if I'm correct, I need to actually do this, but then I'm not injecting anything into here, this interactor thing. I know this is vague, clean architecture stuff, but I'm not injecting anything in here. Whereas I'm doing that now, and I think it's causing me problems. That's basically it. Just wanted to throw that out there. And for the people in the Slack group and stuff like that, I'll probably be talking about this project and my architecture in the Slack group at some point. So if you're curious about that and you get an invite, then I'd be happy to chat about it with you and take input and things of that nature. Because I know there's a couple people who watch the show who are pretty good with clean architecture and stuff of that nature. Anyways, let's get back to questions. All right. Okay. So Vegeto's asking if I can talk about server connectivity like REST and Volley. The only I'm just trying to think. So I have experience with retrofit OKHTTP and then connecting to a REST service that requires OAuth authentication. And I've written one app that kind of does that. So if you have a specific question, I might be able to answer it. But is there any, like, if you could be just a little more specific, or if you want, I can try and just riff on RESTful architecture and stuff like that. Yeah, if you could just kind of clarify that just a bit. Because it is a super interesting topic. And yeah, I'll just wait a moment for a reply there. And I'll see if I can... All right, yep. Okay, so Slifer mentions, or is kind of asking, can you just put a provides service inside the module so that the presenters can request it? I'm not sure. It's like, what I would like to do is try and completely decouple the I want to try and decouple the UI from the services, like really hardcore, like really have them not have anything to do with each other. But that might be one way of approaching the solution, and that might be a better way. I really don't know. It's interesting, like, as a quick side note, it's interesting how it's just kind of funny to me. Dependency injection, as I've mentioned multiple times, is a really, really simple concept. It's something you could teach a child pretty quickly. However, Dagger 2 is to date the most complicated thing I've worked with in Android. And it's not that I can't get a project working with Dagger 2. I did that months ago. It's just to get a project working with Dagger 2 that is also all of this stuff. That's where things get really complex, and it's a really fun challenge because it's really requiring me to use my brain an enormous amount, because I think I'm getting closer to a solution. But I tell you, I've refactored my Dagger implementation probably 9 times now, because every time I think I've got it really close to where I want it, something new comes up. And then it's like, okay, well, I can't really do this here because I wanted to decouple this thing, and it just gets complicated. It's interesting. It's like peeling back 50 layers of an onion, essentially. Anyways, why is my video output low? Okay, I'm gonna assume I'm still streaming, but okay, I might be live again. Really sorry about that. I don't know what it is today, but my stream thing just keeps shutting off randomly, so I apologize about that. That's really frustrating, but I gotta just move on. So Vegeto's kind of asking, he wants to get data from SQL and MySQL or whatever. Oh, okay. Um, yeah. I'm just trying to think if I should even really give my input on this question. Um, so Vegeto, do you is it an open API that you'd be connecting to, or is it a specific API that you can't mention, or like? And what I mean is the server. Like, are you talking to a specific? For example, if you were talking specifically to the thing is, if I understand REST and server communication only within the context of a specific web service that I was talking to. And that was a service that returned JSON. So you mentioned that you already kind of know the JSON approach. I probably can't really help you with that. So I'm really sorry about that, but yeah. Um, I feel like you've been asking questions for a number of times that I've just been flubbing, and I do apologize about that. Maybe one of these days I'll answer a question well for you, but I I don't think I can really give anything that would help you more than you've already got. But I do really want to get into RESTful stuff soon. Anyways, um, okay. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna talk just make kind of a general. This is gonna be a fun one. If the stream doesn't crash, because I'm getting pretty damn tired of that happening. So, there was another beginner question which I received, which was, and unfortunately, I'm so sorry, I forgot to write down the name of the person that asked it, or the name and first initial or whatever. But the question was, what is an adapter? So, I really, really like this question because this was a beginner, and these are the kind of questions that I want beginners to ask. Because the thing about it is that I've worked with adapters since I started Android development. I know they're not that complicated. I know how to use them fairly well. But the question was, what is an adapter? Which is a great general question because that forces me to think like, okay, how would I describe that? And this is why I love general beginner questions. So the question was, what is an adapter? Let's get started. So the first thing I would like to suggest to you if you're a beginner is when you're asking a question, what is something? What is an adapter? What is a recycler view? What is X? What is RxJava? What is Firebase? What is Dagger? What is? That can be a very tough question to answer exactly. So the first place that I start is I ask, what does X, so in this case we're going to talk about adapters. What do adapters do? Instead of saying, what are they? What is an adapter? What does an adapter do? So, in order to answer this question, I'm going to do two things. I've got some of my own notes and some diagrams which I'll share with you. But I also wanted to take a moment to show you how to kind of work this stuff out by looking at documentation. So, now, in most cases, when someone brings up documentation, it's kind of a cue to roll your eyes back in your head and be like, okay, let's get ready for the worst friggin' explanations ever, because generally speaking, most documentation isn't very good, because most programmers don't seem to practice explaining things clearly, which is okay. Let's go to the documentation. So what I'm going to do is let's look at this base adapter. I'll actually make sure that this is totally visible for you. That would probably help. So now, what I'm going to do is just bear in mind, I'm going to be explaining to you what an adapter is in the context of Android and the way they define it. So I'm not necessarily making a broad statement about every class called an adapter in every programming language. Just understand that I'm speaking specifically of, like, you're asking me what are adapters in Android, so that's what I'm going to answer. So the first thing is, let's look a little bit at so we've got this base adapter class. So that's our first hint, is this is a good place to start looking. Base, high level. And then it's going to give kind of a description, which at first seems fairly vague, but it actually answers things fairly well, as we'll see in a moment. So what the documentation says, so base adapter, common base class of common implementation. That's not the best English, but okay. This is documentation for you. Common base class of common implementation for an adapter that can be used both in both a list view and a spinner. Sorry, I had to rephrase that a little bit. So what does that mean, and what can we kind of draw from that? So the first thing, here's the first point. One thing that adapters do, they talk to views. That's the first important thing. They talk to user interface stuff. So I drew kind of a, actually before I get to the diagram, so that's the first thing. They have to talk to views, or generally. So that's why, well, I'll explain why I'm belaboring that point. Let's go to the adapter class. So in the adapter class, it says, an adapter object acts as a bridge between an adapter view and the underlying data for that view. The adapter, well, whatever, yeah, it provides access to data items, and it's responsible for making a view for each item in the data set. So that's the second thing. So, well, the first thing was that it acts as a bridge. It has to talk to user interface. Secondly, it manages a data set. That's the second important thing. It manages a collection of data. So those are really the two things that, to me, describe most adapters. They talk to views, so I'm thinking list view, I'm thinking recycler view, I'm thinking spinner. They talk to views. Secondly, they manage a collection of data. Because what are you trying to display in an adapter? A list, an array, a bunch of items. So what I did was, and again, like the thing about this is, I'm a lot faster. I don't have time to do lots of graphics right now. I just don't have time. So you're gonna have to bear with me, and maybe pause the screen if you're watching this on the recorded version. But here's like a little, and this is not a super accurate diagram. It's just to get you thinking about things. So what I'd like to draw your attention to, I really should have put this on the computer. So we have some kind of data source. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be a database, it could be REST, it could be a RESTful web service, it could be a fake, it doesn't matter. It's a data source. It's got an array of data, which I've represented as little blocks with letters, data. So what'll happen, and let's not worry about how this happens, let's just kind of let our imagination run wild, is that the data gets sent into the fragment or activity, doesn't matter, it gets sent into one of those things. And the important thing to note here is just that the adapter and the view are contained within either an activity or a fragment. It doesn't matter a huge amount. We're looking at high-level stuff, like from a high point of view. We're not looking at specifics. So basically what happens is that the data gets sent or called or whatever gets passed into the activity or the fragment, whatever. Then it gets sent and gets given to the adapter. Now, a couple things to note. Just notice that the adapter, it has position and it talks to a view. Now, again, that view could be a list view, it could be a spinner, it could be a recycler view, it doesn't matter. It talks, these things talk to each other. So basically, in a nutshell, to wrap the question up, what is an adapter? An adapter is a class which manages some collection of data, provides access to that data, and it is strongly tied to user interface, to the extent that many adapters are even responsible for inflating views or creating views. And the best example I could give of that is that if you look in the recycler view adapter, or maybe it's just recycler view adapter. I'll look at it in a minute, whatever. If you look at the recycler view adapter, you'll notice that it has a method called, oh, what's the method called? Come on, Ryan. It's the one that creates the view holder. For some reason, I don't think it's on bind view holder. I need to look at this now. I was going to do this anyway, but let's just check out. Oh yeah, okay. Recycler view. Where are you? And let me just pull the thing up. Okay, recycler view.adapter. I was going to do this anyway, but here it is. Create view. That's it, right? Now I need to just pull up a recycler view on my code because I'm confusing myself. I'll just pull up a friggin' recycler view, which Control N, fragment, reminder list. And where is it? It's down here. Yeah, on create view holder. This is the method I was trying. So right in here, it says it creates a view. That's just plain. Am I in webcam? Yeah, that's just plain as day. So that's one of its responsibilities. The last thing I will mention. Here's the last thing I'll mention. There's lots of different kind of adapters for multiple levels of complexity. One of the most complicated adapters by design is the recycler view.adapter, which I just showed you an example of. What's the deal with the recycler view adapter? And I'm not going to belabor this for very long, but the recycler view adapter implements something called the ViewHolder pattern. So the ViewHolder pattern, just really in brief, so instead of creating, so let's say I get given a list of 50 items of data, 50 little blocks with a letter in them, whatever, it doesn't matter. 50 items of data, an array of data, 50 long. And I want to display that to the user. There's multiple ways I could go about it, but the two main ways is, number one, for every item in my array, create a list item. Create a model. What do I mean by model? I mean one of these, a view holder. Create a view holder. So the first approach is to create a view holder for all 50 items. Now, obviously, that's not a good idea because there will, even at 50 items, that could potentially slow your application down to a crawl. You don't want to be drawing and inflating 50 view holders on the screen all at once, especially, and this is a key point, when you can only see maybe 5 of them, depending on how you've structured your view. Maybe you have really small little list items, but generally speaking, you'll have items of at least 56 dip high, and then maybe you'll have cards. So what is the view holder pattern? I can't really explain the underlying stuff super well, except to say that instead of creating 50 list items, you create maybe 10. I don't know what the actual number is. It's decided in the code. Doesn't matter. You create maybe 10 items. 10 views, 10 models, and then you recycle them as the user scrolls their phone. You recycle these items instead of creating and inflating 50 of them. So I think I've probably explained that fairly obviously, so I'll shut up now. But that is the ViewHolder pattern, and that is just a subset of adapters and why they are kind of interesting things. I won't address this now, but the last thing I'll kind of mention about adapters is one interesting point of discussion is where they fit into an application's architecture. For the time being, I actually placed them as nested classes within my view. So to give you a concrete example, in Pause Trainer, notice how I have the fragment, a fragment, which I consider to be my view in Model View Presenter. This is my view. And nested within it, contained within it, is my recycler view adapter. Now, there are pros and cons to doing this. Obviously, the first thing is that it makes my fragment a lot larger because it's got all this code in it. But there are also benefits to having it nested. So, for example, so for example, by nesting this adapter inside of my view, and the view, by nesting it within the view, but the view still can talk to the presenter, I can talk to the presenter, directly in the adapter's code. Even in the ViewHolder, which I've attached an on-click listener to, it can talk directly to the presenter because it's a nested class. So there are pros and cons to that approach. I think as of now it's the best approach, but the thing about it is that in a way, adapters do kind of manage data, which isn't normally something you want your view to be doing at all. So anyways, I'm kind of rambling. I'll probably talk about this more later. I'll go into a lot more detail with the recycler view tutorial, but just some interesting thoughts. Anyways, I'm going to shut up about adapters, and let's see if I've got any more questions. Okay. Let's see, we got some good discussion here. This is why I love the group that I've got going here, because we've got people like teaching each other in the chat and talking to each other, and that's really what I love about this. Okay, so let me see if I can find anything. Okay. One thing Vegito asks, he's asking if retrofit is better than Volley. This is kind of an interesting point. So I haven't actually worked in Volley, so I can't answer the question directly. However, one thing that I use when I'm deciding between which API to use. So for example, I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's take Retrofit and Volley. I know who develops Retrofit. I know who developed OKHTTP. I respect those people very, very much, and I respect that I see that they are constantly improving, and they put a lot of energy into teaching people Retrofit and OKHTTP, and that is my first gut instinct. Does that mean Retrofit is better than Volley? Absolutely not. I don't really know anything about Volley. It might be written by programmers just as good as Square. It's remotely possible. It might be, they might do a great job with learning resources, but in this particular case, I won't ever learn Volley. I don't need to learn Volley unless I end up reading something that it in one particular use case, one of the I think Daryl mentioned that the thing is there are use cases. Maybe you'll find a use case where Volley is better than Retrofit. But if for any beginners watching this, I would personally, and this is opinion, suggest Retrofit and OK HTTP. It was very easy to get running, and it worked really well. So that's just my personal conjecture on that matter. What else have we got? So Daryl was mentioning that about the adapter to update the data, I should use a different utility. I'm not entirely sure. I believe possibly what Daryl is saying is that I shouldn't nest the adapter, but hopefully he could go into a bit more detail. But interesting point there. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to run so if you've been watching for a while and if you've enjoyed the show so far, you could do me a favor and hit the like button down below and consider subscribing if you can't, or if you would like, if you can't. And I'm just going to run a quick commercial break, take a sip of water, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do with the rest of this Q&A episode. All right. Okay. So here's a good question here. So I'll write this one down. So this is a good general question. So the question is, what library should you use to load an image downloaded from a web server? So this is an interesting question because, and this is something beginners might wish to note, is that if you don't use a good library to handle, I will say handle, and I won't be more specific than that. If you don't use a good, well, whatever. If you don't use a good library to handle image loading, particularly asynchronous loading of potentially large images, you're probably going to fail epically. I think usually it's a out of memory exception, but I'm not, I think there's other things that can go wrong, but yeah, so let's just talk about that for a moment, and then I'll get into the implementation stuff, because I do have a library I would suggest to you, which is quite unsurprisingly from Square. So just for beginners that are watching, if you've ever tried to play around with really large images in your application, probably you've had some weird crashes. So because the thing is, let's say you're loading high resolution images from a web service into a phone, your application only has like a limited amount of memory, of course, And if you go over that, the Android operating system's gonna just kill your shit. It's gonna be like, man, you gotta, it's gonna just stop, it's gonna crash. So, what you need to do, and this is a really important thing for beginners, is there's a couple libraries out there. There's really only one I would personally suggest, and I'll show you what that one is and how to use it a little bit. You're going to want to use a good library for loading and managing images. So let's look at a specific example. I'm going to have to think of how to do this artfully. Just give me one moment. Let's do a profiler. I was just trying to think of which project to open. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open Profiler, and the stream is probably going to lag a little bit, so I'm not going to talk for a moment just while it loads and builds and all that. Okay, so let's go to Pause Trainer. Sorry, Profiler. All right, so what I'm going to do, let's pull up, hopefully this will end up being a good example. Let's go, no, not reminder. I have to remember what this project looks like because I haven't looked at it in like 3 weeks. Okay, so that'll be photo, photo detail. Photo detail fragment. And I think, yeah, this is a good example. So what I'm going to do is let me show you a quick example of what I'm talking about in an app, and then what I'll do is I'll take you through the code because I think it's better to do it that way. Now, hopefully, I have a working version of this app on here. Just give me one moment. Register. One, two, three, four, five. Sorry, I just need to make an account in Profiler before I can even show you this thing. Okay, so that's r@k.com. Oh, of course, it's not going to friggin' work. Okay, it has the wrong friggin' Firebase API. All right, I'm not going to... if you would like to see the demo, you're going to have to run the friggin' app yourself or something like that. Let's just go into the code and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I was hoping to be able to just demonstrate something, but that is not going to work. Or... hold on, I might have a solution. No, not yet. Okay, really sorry about that. Next week I will have a solution. And I'll explain what that means next week. So let's talk about Profiler. And okay, so here specifically, this is what I wanted to get to. So the library I would suggest a person uses if you would like to load a potentially large image or bitmap or whatever from a service or whatever, the library, am I in? Yeah. The library I would suggest you use is Picasso. So the way that Picasso works is absolutely frickin' amazing because all I've done is I've given this thing a photo URL. Where does that even come from? See, this is one of the things I need to refactor in Profiler because yeah, it doesn't make sense for the view to be holding on to state like this, but let's just pretend that this photo URL is being sent into set bitmap, as it probably should be. So how Picasso works is the first thing you say is Picasso.with. So that gives it some kind of context, presumably. That's the first thing. And Picasso uses, I believe this is called a a builder pattern. I'm not even sure if you would call it a pattern, but it's a builder. Yeah, I think it's a builder pattern, which is anytime you see like these chained kind of method calls, that's a pattern you can do, which is really, really awesome if you're making APIs. Just a random little tangent, but what you can do is, so this method load, you can provide it. If I click on this inside the brackets and brackets, if I click inside the brackets and hit Control P, you'll notice that this method will receive a URI. It can receive a path, which could be something on the device. It can receive a file, and it can receive a resource. Maybe you can't read that, but I just explained it. So Picasso allows you to give a path or a URI or anything into this load method, and then you tell it how you want it to kind of fit into whatever image, whatever view you're loading it into. So there's all kinds of methods. Go read the documentation. It's good documentation. You can say scale, or what can I say? I can say center crop. I can say center inside. I can do all kinds of stuff. A good general purpose operator or method call, I guess, would be fit. Because basically what fit does is it pretty much just does all the work for you. And the last thing I'll talk about is this into method. So into, and this is why I love this API, because it says what it does. It's got great names, with, whatever. That one, with, but load this thing, make it fit into this view. Photo is a view, and that's poorly named, but photo is just an image view. Load this photo into this image view, and when it's done loading, tell the presenter. Or if it fails, tell the presenter. You don't really have to you don't have to do the callback. I do because it makes sense, but you can also just say into. Load into this, and then it's synchronous. So so if you're curious about image loading, if you have a project where you need to load an image from your device, from a server, from whatever, I would highly suggest Picasso. I think Square released another image loading library, which I can't remember if it was a lighter weight solution or what, but there is other things you can kind of look at. But I would highly suggest Picasso to start with for image loading. All right, let's go back. I'm not going to be answering too many more questions. And let's see here. It looks like Amandeep is having kind of a blue streak. I hope you're okay. I've recently learned that I don't know how you pronounce it, and I won't. Why is my video output low again? Jesus Christ, that's annoying, but whatever. I recently learned that I don't know how to pronounce it, but maybe Chutia or something is, I guess you would say Hindi swear word. Anyways, I need to learn more about swear words, but yep. Let's see here. Oh, okay. There is one more. Thank you, Daryl. Daryl once again has mentioned. So there was one other library by Square, I believe, called Glide, Glidee. Sorry, only one E. And it's life cycle aware, so that might be also something you'd like to look into, but I'm quite sure that's from Square as well. It's from the same people who made Picasso, I'm pretty sure. Let me just double check that really quickly so I'm not talking out of my asshole. Pardon my language. Where's Glide? Oh, sorry, maybe it's not by Square. Sorry about that. I might have totally misspoken about that. Yeah, sorry, I don't think Glide is with Square at all. For some reason, I think Square did a second image loading library, but you know, whatever. Just disregard what I said about Glide, but certainly check it out as well. Daryl mentioned that it's life cycle aware, so that could be quite useful in certain use cases. I'm happy with Picasso in my projects, and I think I can get it to work fine because I most of my stuff is just decoupled as much as possible from the life cycle. But if you are using activities and stuff like that, and you are tightly coupled to the life cycle, you might maybe Glide is a better library for you. Thank you for mentioning that, Daryl. All right. Well, I'm getting. I think I'm basically. I'll answer one more question, and I think I'll call it a day there because we're getting on to an hour. And once again, I'm being told that my video output is low. I don't understand why, but it's funny. Like some days when I do streaming, there's no issues, and some days there's. I just can't seem to get it to behave properly. But I basically blame Shaw, which is my internet provider, anyways. And Vegito has confirmed that chutia, or however you pronounce it, is a Hindi swear word. So I need to learn a little bit of Hindi. But anyways, I like to learn a little bit of all languages. While I wait for another question or a final question, I'm just going to ramble for a little bit about languages. And one thing that I this is just totally off topic, but one thing I kind of regret is here in Canada, we're technically a bilingual country. So in Canada, when you go to school, you'll generally, if you're in an English part of Canada, obviously English will be your native language, but you'll be taught French most of the way through school, and there is French immersion. And it's really unfortunate for me because I grew up in kind of a redneck family to a small degree. Not a redneck family, but some of my parental figures had some redneck views about the French language. So as a result, I didn't really pay any attention to learning Français as a kid. By the time I was like just out of high school, like 17 years old, I had ignored French almost entirely. I could have been fluent, but because I was told, don't bother learning that, then they're Frenchy talk. Because of that belief, I didn't put any energy into speaking French. So now I'm in this really annoying position where I've met some friends who parlaient français. J'ai parlé un petit français, not very well, but it's just frustrating because like I could have been fluent, but because it's just irritating. Now, if you're in a French part of Canada, so Quebec is the only. Quebec is primarily French, like they're far majority French, and then I think Newfoundland and Labrador and some of the East Coast speaks quite a bit of French, but they speak this. Some of them they talk like this. They speak the joual, and some of them speak like these hilarious, almost pidgin languages of French and English together, and it sounds so funny. Like, man, I'm just quoting one of my friends of mine. Man, cherche dans ma trunk pour mon spare tire, calice, or something like that. It's this hilarious sounding thing. So anyways, the moral of that story is if you have kids, don't brainwash them into thinking learning a second language is a stupid idea, because it's actually really, really useful, and I would have loved to learn French. And now I have to learn it later in my life when my brain is less absorbent and I have less time. So anyways, that was totally off topic, but I felt like talking about it anyway. So let's see if we've got one last question, and then I think I will be wrapping it up. All right. So Vegito is asking how to join the Slack group. So what I will do, Vegito, is if you could message me on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, just message me on something, and you message me, and then I'll give you further details on joining the group. It's a quick process. I'm not gonna. So here's the thing, and this is really important. This is not Vegito will get an invitation because I appreciate that you've been with me for a long time, and I do appreciate that. And if you're someone who's watching this who might like to join the group eventually, join me for a couple episodes, ask some good questions, give me some feedback, and be polite, and I will probably invite you to the group. You don't need to be a pro developer. However, just for future reference, don't harass me. Don't ask me a whole bunch of times, can I join the group? Can I join the group? Can I join the group? You will be invited to the group based on the criteria that I set out for. This is not a place where I want 100 random people asking me questions all day, because I already get that with YouTube. I get comments all the time. Some of them are really good questions, and I'll answer them with paragraphs. Some of them are really terrible questions. Like, some people will just be like, hey, can you build my app for me for free? And it's like, no, actually, I'm not going to build your app for you. And then anyway, sorry, I'm going off topic again. I would like this to be a community of people interested in helping each other and talking about software architecture and things like that. It's not going to become a place for people to sell shit. It's not going to become a place for random one-shot questions to do your homework and stuff like that. If you're serious about writing good code, doesn't matter what level of programmer you are, I'd be happy to invite you. However, be respectful at all times. Like, just respect people's time. Don't feel entitled to answers. Don't feel entitled to people's time. And you should do fine. You'll probably get an invite soon. All right. Let's see here. Thanks. Daryl speaks French and would be happy to help. I do. I speak a tiny amount now. Like, I can say some broken sentences and things of that nature. But the problem is I'm a lot better at speaking random French Canadian profanities like "caliste tabarnak" and things of that nature. So I need to actually learn the practical part. But amusingly enough for me, so I'm almost a tiny bit conversational in French. I'm kind of conversational in German. Ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch. Ich habe Deutsch gelernt für 5 Monate in Schule. And I used to listen to the music. I've listened to German music since I was 11. And then I started listening to a bunch of Russian music. So now I'm interested in learning Russian. And then I lived with a Korean guy, so I could say, 안녕하세요, 저는 라이언입니다, and just that kind of stuff. And it would be really nice if I could just get fluent in one or two or three languages instead of speaking like bits and pieces of 10. Anyways, I'd rather speak bits and pieces of 10 than nothing, but yeah, just takes practice. When I have free time, I'll do that. So I'm gonna call it a day, because I have a very busy day ahead of me. So thank you so much for joining me again today. I will definitely be streaming next Sunday at the regular time. However, I might not do a Q&A. I might pick next Sunday to be the day that I marathon build an app. So in that case, I won't do the Q&A. I don't know that. It's going to really depend on how far I make it with stuff. So I really cannot tell for certain. But I'd say it's about 50-50. I will be live again next Sunday at the regular time, but I might not be doing a Q&A. It's about 50-50 at this point. At some point, I'm going to be marathon building an app, and the only regular day I have off is Sunday. So that's kind of the way it is. So that's all for now. Hopefully that was a fairly interesting and informative episode. Apologies again if I was all over the place and kind of ADD, but I think that's why some people kind of like watching me to a degree. That's all for now. Thanks a lot. I'll say bye in every language I know. Goodbye. Au revoir. Auf Wiedersehen. Do svidania. Do widzenia. Ciao gaseo. And peace.